sir, why did you pause LNG exports to Europe? Like, I don't understand, you know, liquefied natural gas is in great demand by our allies. Why would you do that? Because you understand, we just talked about Ukraine. You understand you're fueling Vladimir Putin's war machine because they got to get their gas from him, you know. And he looks at me, stunned with this, and he said, I didn't do that.
The president supports the pause, and it is important to understand the climate and economic impacts. That's why it's so important, right, of these LNG exports. And it is the impacts on consumers, right, the impacts on communities, and that's why the president supports these LNG pauses.
And he looks at me, stunned with this, and he said, I didn't do that. And I said, Mr. President, yes, you did. It was an executive order, like, 3 weeks ago. And he goes, no, I didn't do that. And he's arguing with me. I said, Mr. President, respectfully, could I go out here and ask your secretary to print it out? We'll read it together. You definitely did that. And he goes, it occurred to me, Barry, he was not lying to me. He genuinely did not know what he had signed.
The White House issued a statement yesterday that was dismissive of Speaker Johnson's idea to tie that package to the policy banning future LNG exports. It said that the president wants the A package passed right away and that you support the LNG export ban. But can you clarify whether that means you're ruling out that proposal from Speaker Johnson? Like, is that off the table, or is this something that you might consider down the road?
I mean, we've been very clear, right? We've been very clear. The reporting we have said, as you said from our statement, is not true. We've been really clear about House Republicans should pass the bipartisan national security agreement that already passed with overwhelming support out of the Senate, 70-29. You've heard me say that many times before. We need to make sure Ukraine has what it needs to defend itself against Russia's aggression. We're going to continue to be clear about that. And there's a way to get Ukraine what they need. All the speaker has to do is put that national security supplemental on the floor. The president supports the pause on pending, obviously, additional approvals of LNG export licenses to evaluate the economic and climate impacts on consumers and communities. He supports that pause. And there is a way to deal with what Ukrainians are fighting for right now. They're fighting for their democracy. They're fighting for their freedom against the aggression of Mr. Putin. There's a way to get them the assistance that they need. And that is to pass that bipartisan, we believe that would be a bipartisan support, national security supplemental that got bipartisan support. If he puts it on the floor, we know for a fact that Republicans would vote for it. We know where Democrats stand. He needs to put that on the floor. Okay.
Just going back to the LNG piece for a moment, I think everybody in this room, we have a sense for how the president personally feels about Ukraine and Ukraine funding. I mean, he's made it abundantly clear over the course of 2 years. This LNG temporary pause doesn't have as high of a profile. And can you give any sense for what it is that the president, why he cares so much about it, whether he has shared with you any sort of deep views that he has on this particular very kind of targeted policy?
Yeah, so look, the pause on the pending approvals of LNG export, it is important. It is important to understand the climate and economic impacts. That's why it's so important, right, of these LNG exports. And it is the impacts on consumers, right, the impacts on communities, and that's why the president supports these LNG pauses. So we're going to continue to meet our LNG needs of our allies, and the temporary pause does not impact current LNG exports. But there is by having these pauses, it does tell us something that is important to know. And so that's why the president supports it. As it relates to what we've been hearing from the speaker, Speaker Johnson, we've been very clear. If we really want to help the people of Ukraine, the brave people of Ukraine, we got to get that national security supplemental done. He has to put that on the floor. It will get overwhelming bipartisan support. We know that to be true. That's how we can help the people of Ukraine.
I guess what I'm trying to say is is the president personally invested in this ban or this temporary pause the way he is?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, when we talk about the existential threat of climate, this is something that the president has said it is incredibly important to deal with this emergency. And he has taken more robust action than any other president. This is part of this, right? And so the president has been not just talked about it, but has taken action. So I would look at this as part of the action that he's taken to deal with the climate crisis. And you know, it is indeed a crisis. When he walked into this administration, he talked about 4 crises that we had to deal with as Americans. And climate change is not just as Americans, as a world. And so climate crisis was one of them. And he's taken action, and he's going to continue to do that. And he's been robust. It's been comprehensive, more than any other president.
It just sort of seems like a smaller piece to that
But
larger.
I would put it together in that larger piece. Yes, it's a smaller piece of obviously the larger initiative of what we're trying to do, but it's also critical. It's important. Look, the reports that are out there as it relates to Speaker Johnson, they are not true. We know how the best way to get assistance for Ukraine is to pass that national security supplemental. That's what we want to see. It'll get done in overwhelmingly in a bipartisan way. Go ahead. I know.
It occurred to me, Barry, he was not lying to me. He genuinely did not know what he had signed.